This is the Brew World Order Podcast.
Welcome to the Brew World Order Podcast, the podcast where we talk to brewery owners and ask questions about owning a brewery so that future brewery owners can learn a thing or two. I'm Mike Curtin, and if you haven't subscribed yet, well, this is episode 67. Where the hell you been? And speaking of episode 67, this just happens to be it. And in this episode, I sit down with John Falco, owner of Lincoln's Beard Brewing Company in Miami, Florida. John tells me how they came up with the name for his brewery, which is a great story, I might add. What the future looks like for him, his brewery, and his many other shops that he's opened. And he tells us a funny little story about a boyfriend asking his angry girlfriend, "What are you doing that's positive right now?" My man has obviously never had a girlfriend before because that was probably one of the worst things you could say in that moment. But come to think of it, I'm really proud of you. Because you're doing something that's extremely positive right now. You're listening to John Falco drop some of his sweet knowledge about the brewing industry. And if you're looking to open up your own brewery, then you're in the right spot. Because that's what we do here at the Brew World Order. And another thing we like to do is sit back, crack open a beer or two, and enjoy the podcast. What did you think we were doing? John Falco was born and raised in Miami, Florida. His mother and father had very blue-collar jobs, and growing up it instilled a great work ethic in John. After graduating high school, he would attend Florida International University. One day, he would cross paths with a woman in a blue uniform. It piqued his interest, so he asked her what she did for a living. She told John she was an Air Force officer, and if he was interested in joining, he should speak to Captain John Miller. John did just that, and before he knew it, he was all signed up to enter the Air Force. He would spend 7.5 years working in the Air Force before finally leaving to work for the Defense Intelligence Agency. While working there, he would start to homebrew his own beers. 3 to 4 years into working for the DIA, John decided he wasn't really happy at his job, but he did realize brewing beer brought him joy. He finally had enough and asked 5 of his co-workers if they wanted to open a bar. When they all agreed, they immediately got to work on making it happen. It would take about 2 years before they finally opened their doors, but in 2016, they opened up as Lincoln Beard's Brewing Company in Miami, Florida. And John is here with me today. John, how's it going, man?
Going good, Mike. How you doing?
All right, not too bad. I know I heard the story already when I met you in person, but for the listeners at home, where did you come up with the name for Lincoln's Beard? Because I thought it was a great story. So
Yeah. You know, I always say the short story is it was the name of my fantasy football team, right? But that's not the story everyone wants. So
right.
It became the name of our brewery when we were kind of, we even did a bracket of different names and we tried to whittle it down to one, and that didn't work and feel right. So ultimately I said, hey guys, what about Lincoln's Beard? And I told my staff, I told the partnership this story. I said, Lincoln's Beard is named after, there was a little girl, the 11-year-old girl named Grace Bettle. This was when, in late 1800s, when Abraham Lincoln was running for presidency. And she came home one day and she found a little, pamphlet there on her kitchen table, which her father had brought home, and it had I assume what was a sketch of Abraham Lincoln's face without a beard. Abraham Lincoln without a beard, and I encourage anyone to Google this, is an interesting looking cat. He's a very weak chin. He's just kind of a gangly, weird looking guy. And, Grace Bettle said, that's not going to work. So she took pen to paper and very eloquently, as an 11-year-old in the 1800s would have wrote Abraham Lincoln a letter saying, hey, you should grow your beard out. So, because right now you're not looking too hot, you're weak, your chin's a little weak. You should grow your beard out. You look a lot better. And women who couldn't even vote at the time will tell their husbands to vote for you. That was her justification.
Right.
So what we do know that letter went to Abraham Lincoln. We know that through historical documents. We know Abraham Lincoln received that letter. We know Abraham Lincoln grew his beard out for whatever reason. I like to think it was from Grace Bettle's letter. And we, of course, know Abraham Lincoln won the election and went on to do some of the most amazing, perhaps the most amazing things in the history of the United States. So I like to think this letter, and of course, Abraham Lincoln then met with Grace Bettle on his victory tour, if you will, and thanked her for her letter. So this is historically proven. I probably butchered the story a little bit, but ultimately, I like to think an 11-year-old girl changed the course of history. So that whole concept of a small spark starting a big fire has always resonated with me.
Right.
And I thought it'd be a perfect name for a brewery, and it's a very hard name to forget, you know?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's really the origin of the name.
Yeah, it's a great story, man. And like I said, yeah, small spark. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that, man.
Yes, sir.
What was the exact aha moment for me? I knew you said you weren't happy with your job, but what was that aha moment for you where you decided that you wanted to open a brewery?
You know, it is very benign, and it's the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back.
Right.
I was in a government paid for commuter van. I was sitting in the back of this van in my uncomfortable shirt and tie, and we were just sitting at a light, and I looked over to my left side, and I saw a brand new strip mall. It's not where we opened the bar. It's not where we opened the brewery, but it was a brand new strip mall. And I looked over and there was a bunch of vacancy. I looked over and I said to the guy next to me, who ultimately became one of my partners, I said, we should open a bar there. And he kind of was like, all right, let's do it. So I was like, I'm going to put a business plan together. And that was literally the small spark, if you will, to stay on trend here. And that's kind of the story of Lincoln's. Yeah.
Awesome. So, from that moment to the moment you finally opened your doors to the public, sure. What would you say was the most challenging part for you?
Yeah, absolutely. 100% the most challenging part for me was getting permitted, getting my plans up through the whole build out and construction process.
Right.
Was such an unknown for me, and it was so challenging. And to be honest, even now, we're lucky enough to be building out a 5th location.
Awesome.
It's still the most challenging time. It's crazy. I was lucky enough, since I had 5 other partners, we were able to get enough money from our savings and whatnot that the financial aspect of it wasn't too big of a deal. But yeah, the construction was an absolute nightmare. Absolute nightmare.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Yep.
And you talk about finances. Where did you go about finding the capital to fund your business?
So ultimately, we ended up just kind of digging into our pockets and our bank accounts, and our savings. I gutted my entire savings, and that's really how we ended up coming up with capital.
Right, investing in yourself. It's good.
Correct. Yes, sir.
Yeah. And when opening, what's something you never thought you were going to have to deal with ever?
Oh man, that's a fantastic question. Wow, something I never thought I'd have to deal with. That's you just silenced me, which is a very difficult thing to do.
Hey, awesome.
To be a bit somber, not necessarily in the brewing world, a little bit in the bartender world, but we have food aspects, and obviously the kitchen industry is very well known for being an industry where you have folks from many walks of life.
Right.
And what I have definitely encountered is a lot of individuals that have a history of severe drug use and mental health associated drug use and whatnot.
Right.
In the last 6 years, we've unfortunately lost 2 cooks to drug overdoses.
Jeez. Sorry to hear that.
I would say certainly the most challenging thing I've faced is feeling, and this is very egocentric for me to say this because of course they had it much harder than I did, right. But feeling so helpless to be able to, help these folks. And obviously once they've overdone, these are fantastic people, that are just losing a battle,
For sure.
So that is certainly it, and that's still something I'm at a loss. And I've worked with organizations, be it mental health organizations and organizations that provide on the spot, Narcan and whatnot. But that is absolutely the most challenging part of this industry, and I see it less of an issue on the bartender side. Bartenders tend to struggle with a little bit of alcohol use. So it's important for us, to find that sweet spot where, obviously it's not our job to be parents to these grown individuals.
Right. But
where's our responsibility begin and end to make sure there's some level of, of tolerance or not tolerance, moderation, and, imposed from our end. That has definitely been the toughest thing for me to deal with. No doubt.
Interesting. That's the first time I've actually heard that. That's a good point. But it's nice to be able to lend a hand where you can, They are adults, but everybody's got their struggles, man,
Absolutely. Yes, sir.
So what is a quality that you possess that makes you a good business owner?
Oh, wow. I think that's a tough question to answer. So I would say the one thing that I do that I think is the most effective is I empower my employees. Is I don't, I see this as kind of given my history and the things I've done in my life, this is like my second life. It's my second chance at life. I feel like I don't have anything to prove per se. So everything, when I come into work, the one thing that I always want to do is just progress our industry down here. And I'm a 41-year-old guy in a very young industry. It's
Right.
not lost on me that my relevance has a shelf life, and it's probably reaching the end of that. So it's so important for me to allow the people that work under me to express themselves in every sense of the word, in the way they operate and what they cook and the recipes they design, be it beer or food. I love letting them do that and letting them run with that. I think that's something that's very difficult. It was difficult for me at first, but it's very difficult for a lot of entrepreneurs to do, is to let folks run and let folks take the reins. So that's something I've luckily figured out over the years, and I think that's probably my most valuable trait, certainly.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I know you were probably hitting your stride, and then COVID hit.
Yeah.
So what was that like for your company? And how did you guys go about pivoting and making it work for you?
Sure. We certainly pivoted in every way we can, in the obvious sense. We started pushing as much takeout as we could. The fact that our food is pizza really helped, because pizza just works for takeout, But I think the biggest thing we did, when it all went down, and everyone was depressed then, of course, but we all looked at each other and we said, listen, our only goal, forget about making money, because we're going to lose our ass. The only goal here is to stay relevant. So when we come out of this thing, at the time we thought it'd come out of it, 3 months. So yeah, 3 months when we come out of this thing. Now, 3 years. We'll look back, when folks decide to go out again, when folks are comfortable enough to go out again, they're going to come choose us, because this is where they picked up their to-go beer. And, this is where, we're the guys that they were seeing on Instagram, because we were taking the time to do ridiculous, funny videos,
Right.
Just stay relevant, stay in front of people, don't lie down. And that's what we did. And we're certainly reaping the rewards from that now. Yeah.
That's awesome. That's definitely a smart idea. I don't know too many people that kind of said that. I know people kind of just said, "Oh, we went to canning and this and that," and like there was a good show of support. But yeah, I that makes a lot of sense. Makes tons of sense, especially when everybody's bunkered down and holding tight. They need a good laugh.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah. So since opening, if you could have redone one thing, let's say a lesson learned from a mistake or whatever the case may be, what would that one thing have been?
I would have had more patience.
More patience.
I would have had more patience. The early years of Lincoln's Beard, you'd instill something. You'd say, hey, we're going to do trivia night on Tuesday. And 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later, trivia night's not working how you thought it would, so you change it, and you change it. And the one thing I've realized now is that it takes about, I use the time frame 6 weeks. To me, it takes about 6 weeks for customers to notice you even did anything.
Right.
So for them to even show up, it takes about 6 weeks. Then they don't really know, it's not even a regular thing for them for probably another 6 weeks. So now you're 3-4 months into this thing. Now people are starting to resonate. At that point, I've changed 4 or 5 things. So now they got to start the process over. So the one thing that I would have done differently is I would have just taken my time. Don't rush things. Take your time. Do it right. Really give it time for guests to realize you've done it. And that is absolutely the one thing I would have done different that I'm actually doing now, thankfully,
Right. Who do you think's inspired you the most in the brewing industry? I'm sure you've come across many people who have helped you along the way, but who do you think's made the biggest impact for you?
Definitely. I feel like I could never repay back what those locally have done for me, and those 6 breweries that were here before me, the help they provided me, which was invaluable help. But the one person that I've really received the most inspiration from, unbeknownst to him, is Sam Calagione out of Dogfish Head.
Right.
The way he runs things, the way he treats his people, how he keeps quality and being genuine above anything, to me has always been an inspiration to me, and I encourage anyone opening any business but certainly in the brewing world, to read his first book, which is Brewing Up a Business. I have a second book now, I haven't read it yet, but his first book, Brewing Up a Business, is fantastic.
Yes, I'm about halfway through it. I just got it on Audible, and I was listening to it. I got about halfway through it, man. It's great so far, and very interesting.
They moved down to Dogfish Head, Miami. Here, they moved down to Miami now.
Yes, I heard that.
I've had the opportunity. Yeah, I've had the opportunity to have a couple beers with him now. And he's as good as I thought he'd be. Really nice guy.
Yeah, I hear that from a lot of people who have met him and said he's a great guy. And speaking of being a success, which he is, hugely successful.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
How do you define success? And is there a moment that sticks out for you where you kind of like were in awe of how well things were going?
Yeah, I absolutely define success as the impact you're having on humanity, right?
Right.
Obviously on my sense, it's on a small sense. I have a couple spots in small neighborhoods and a big city, but it's definitely a small pond as opposed to someone who's national estate stamp California or anyone.
Right.
But what impact are you making? If the beer you're making, if the events you're having are all derivative, everyone's done them already, you're not anything, and you're just throwing it out there because you saw it work somewhere else, and maybe it'll bring in a couple bucks. That's fine. I get it. You got to pay your bills, and maybe you don't have the ability to be creative and to drive things. But success is waking up every morning, coming up with something creative from a genuine place where it feels right, and contributing that to human consciousness. Just creating great things.
Right.
That to me is how I define success. It might take a little longer to see those fruits of that labor, but in the end, it pays tenfold what anything basic and derivative will pay. And I really felt that was the right path when we came and opened Strange Beast. When we came and opened Strange Beast, and we got a little press because we had Strange Beast was the second of our bars, and we had a little bit of we had some success in Lincoln's Beard. And my regulars came over here and they saw what I was doing here, and it was a totally different concept, and they were loving it. And the fact that they had that confidence in me, that they thought this totally new concept was going to be just as good, albeit different, I went home about as proud as anyone could possibly be over there.
Right.
Back then, and that's when I knew my path and my direction was the right one.
Right. Do you have that moment that kind of like stuck out to you for Lincoln's Beard? Was that like when you first opened, was there anything that kind of sticks out in your mind now that kind of was like that, like you were in awe of what's happening?
Yeah. We have this, we're going to switch it to an ice cream eating competition now that we have the ice cream shop. But we have a peanut butter and jelly eating competition every year. Although we missed it during COVID, but
right.
it was called the Don't Be Jelly Fest, and all the local breweries come, and it's a total shit show.
Right.
It's basically a professional wrestling event, without the wrestling. Everyone's dressed up, everyone's in costume, everyone's in character, everyone's roasting everyone. And sitting back watching that go down and seeing how much fun everyone's having and how genuine it was and how everyone was hugging and gripping and grinning and smiling. I was like, man, this is a small part of this was me, but just being able to enable this, I think we're doing something right. So that was definitely my aha moment at Lincoln Beer for sure.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, that's definitely a great feeling. Probably bringing everybody together, just seeing a lot of smiles and laughs. It's awesome.
Yes, sir.
And I know you're saying you're opening your fifth location now. I'm sure it's a lot to deal with. I know you have a probably a great team around you that helps to take some of that weight off. But how important is a mental break for you from everything, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I'll let you know when I find out. Just kidding. No, it's incredibly important. That I think is been my biggest challenge personally. When I worked for the government and I didn't really like my job, I would wake up every Sunday morning and homebrew. It was amazing. I loved it. It recharged me. Now that I enjoy my job, I always want to do it. I want to, even though I hate emails, I'll sit there, 11 o'clock at night, and I get on my phone, start checking some emails, responding to people, texting my merch guy who makes our shirts. Hey, I have this t-shirt idea. So finding that time to shut it off has been a challenge. I think the closest thing to it has been going on walks with my dog. I have this Apple Watch that a buddy of mine gave me that it has about 2 hours of battery life. So he's like, yeah, I know what to do with this thing. You want it? I was like, yeah, I'll take it. And so I charge it up and I throw a couple songs and podcasts on there, a couple Brew World Order episodes, right?
Nice.
And I walk around the block with my dog, with no phone or anything, and I find that a huge recharge for me, for sure.
Right. So, in the last 5 years for you in the industry, what do you think's been the biggest change?
When I first got into this industry, there were two paths you can go. You can have the brew pub path, essentially, where you brew everything, you serve it in-house, and you hope you pack the doors, or you hope you get people in the doors.
Right.
And the other way to do it was to spend a lot of capital and to ultimately build a big distribution brewery. I don't think that's the case anymore. I think as a small-time guy, you got to go that brew pub path, or you got to have just a massive amount of money and go large scale. I don't think the ability to build from a small, at least not in a major city, to build from a small distribution brewery to build to the point where you have a company that's valuable and generating substantial revenue. I just don't think that path there without a considerable amount of capital to go from grassroots to big. It's so competitive. There's so many beers being distributed all over the country. COVID's really pushed that, but folks are just casting the net much wider. Keg prices have been driven down. Distributors, they got to sell one beer, so they could, whereas before maybe they're carrying a couple blonde ales. Now maybe they have 8, 9, 10 blonde ales. If you don't have the marketing team to push your blonde ale, you're going to get buried. So that to me, it's really, really crushed the little guy in that sense. So, the luck of the draw, I opened with the brew pub model. I never really distributed. We distributed a lot for a small period of time. Or not a lot, distributed locally a bit for a small period of time. But we've since gone away from that. We just kind of got lucky having chosen that path. But that's really what I would say is the tough part.
Right.
For sure.
Yeah, man. For sure.
Yeah.
What was your gateway beer into the craft beer world?
Good. That's a much easier question. So, my gateway beer, and I know it's not craft beer, but my gateway beer was certainly Newcastle. I used to drink a ton of Newcastle. I didn't know any better, Budweiser probably brews it or something.
Right.
But I used to drink a ton of Newcastle, and I loved it. I'm like, oh, it was such a flavorful brown ale, which I still think it is. That ultimately led me over to Fat Tire. And ever since, Fat Tire, since we Belgian Fat Tire, I haven't looked back, which I guess isn't even craft anymore. It's owned by the Spanish company or something. But that was definitely the gateway. Locally, I'd say I used to be a huge fan of Pop's Porter from Wynwood Brewing here, which recently in the last few years actually sold to Anheuser-Busch. So they brewed a great porter.
Interesting. Yeah. It seems like all these gateway beers into the craft beer world, they're all being bought out by huge, the big time companies, man. It's wild.
They are, man. They are.
It's wild. But, I mean, good for them. But it's just wild to see.
Yes, it is.
And you've homebrewed. You brew. What do you think? If you have one homebrewing tip to pass on, what would that homebrewing tip be?
That's an easy one. Pitch more yeast. I don't care how much yeast you think you're pitching. Pitch more.
Pitch more yeast.
Pitch more yeast. If you can make a starter, always make a starter. If you can't make a starter, use dry yeast. That's absolutely it. And the one thing I'll say is, if you have a brewery near you, yeast is very expensive. I don't know what a vial of yeast goes for nowadays, but I think I was paying $6 8 years ago.
Right.
We probably dump out, who knows, 50 pounds of yeast in a week, maybe more. We're a small brewery.
Right.
If you have a brewery near you and you like their beers, unless you're brewing something crazy like Belgians are, hit up that brewery and say, hey, listen, if I bring a mason jar by, you mind if I grab some of that yeast? And there's no doubt in my mind, any brewery's going to tell you, hell yeah. Because I'll tell you what, back when I was in the brew house more, or at all, now I don't even get in the brew house anymore other than walking through it. Back when I was in the brew house more, I loved when people did that because I felt bad dumping out all this delicious, great yeast,
Right.
So yes, absolutely pitch more yeast, pitch healthier yeast. Yeast is the only thing that can make a bad recipe taste good and it's the only thing that can make a good recipe taste like crap.
Right.
So pitch more yeast.
I don't know how many times you reuse yeast, or if you do.
I do.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because that's what somebody put me on to. Because like I never reused yeast when doing home brewing, because it's like, you know, you're doing small barrels. But I'm sure I learned that you know, you can use it over and over and over and over again. I'm like, oh really? I didn't even know that.
Yeah, man. So how I would do it as a home brewer. So I had these speedle fermenters, right? So I'd rack my beer off, and I would, whatever's left on the bottom there, I'd leave a little bit of beer in there. I'd shake it up, and I'd pour it into a whole bunch. You know, I'd sanitize my hands, sanitize a bunch of mason jars,
Right.
and I would just pour them all into mason jars, put it in my fridge. It'll separate, decant, and dump into the next batch. That's how I would always do it. And it always worked beautifully.
Good to know.
Yeah.
Good tips, man. Thank you. And
Yes, sir, yeah.
I know you said you have 5 separate shops open. You have Lincoln's Beard. You have Strange Beast.
Strange Beast. Crybaby Ice Cream.
Say that. What's the 5?
Oh, it's so I have Lincoln's Beard, Strange Beast, Pub and Pizzeria. I got Maxwell Brothers, which we call Maxwell Brothers Clothing Store. It's kind of like a very soft speakeasy, if you will.
Right.
That's a pub and pizzeria. We have Crybaby Creamery, which is our creamery and bakehouse, which is our ice cream and cookie shop. And then we got Thorn on the way. Thorn is it's going to be a cocktail bar, but we're going to be serving some some of our core beers, but also doing some barrel aging there as well in beer. So yeah.
Very cool, man. So what do you think's next for, I can't even say your brewery. What do you think's the next venture, and what does the future look like? I know you say you're doing a build out now. Is that basically where we're going to, or is there more on the horizon?
Yeah, I think there's definitely more on the horizon. I think the three paths for me that I'm going to be exploring. The first one is this full liquor concept. You know, the Thorn, which is a big concept. It's going to take a lot of energy and a lot of time for my team and I. The second path is Crybaby. Crybaby, our creamery and bakehouse, has been getting a lot of attention everywhere. So I think there's going to be some growth in that section. Maybe some additional locations. Hopefully, going statewide at some time in the next few years, which would be nice.
Very cool.
Yeah, and I think the third thing is cannabis. Is the cannabis market. I feel like, you know, we're probably going to be recreational in 2022, at least vote yes, which will probably be enacted in January of 23. So, you know, which I'm not going to say that's a substitute for alcohol, but many people are going to choose to, you know, dabble in that vice drink, you know, especially with a lot of the Gen Zers growing up in the next generation.
Yeah.
It's a healthier alternative to alcohol, certainly in excess. And I think for those of us in the industry that want to have a long-term future, I think we just need to explore that. We need to at least look at that and see what that can, you know, aside from alcohol, you know, how we can leverage that to be a revenue stream. So that's certainly the third area that I'm looking. The area I'm showing the least amount of attention to, but certainly something that's on my radar.
Awesome. Very cool to see what happens next.
Yes, sir.
So if somebody had come to you, which I'm sure they do, and ask you for advice on opening their own brewery, what would you tell them?
Yeah. I would say, first thing I would say is everyone else is going to tell you not to do it. Don't do it. It's something cliche to say that. I will say absolutely do it. I love my job. I love my life. It's going to be hard as hell, but anything done right is hard as hell.
Right.
Yeah, you know, I'd say take your time with it. Find the right location. Hook up with people like me that have been in the industry. I can connect you with good architects, good GCs, good commercial brokers, you know. But above all, what I always tell folks is before you start thinking about all your location and your building and all that, tell your loved ones, you know, if you're lucky enough to live with someone that supports you and loves you, whether it's a husband, wife, mother, whatever, tell them, I need a little space. This evening is going to be mine. Get in whatever whatever mindset is your most creative. Maybe you drink a few whiskeys and you listen to some J. Cole. You know, maybe you want to, you know, enjoy some cannabis. Whatever puts you in the most creative mindset. Do that. Sit down in front of a computer for a couple hours, and without even worrying about punctuation or grammar or layout, write down every idea every concept, every operational philosophy, every personal philosophy that's related to that business you want to open on a word processor, on Microsoft Word or whatever your poison is.
Right.
Jump it on there. That's what I've always done. And the last time I did that, I got 9 pages, single space. It was a total disaster. It didn't matter. I got 9 pages, single space. I went to bed, walked away from it. Week later, I came back and I deleted repetitive stuff. I put it in the proper format, the layout, whatever. And I had about 6 pages, double spaced. And that was the narrative to my business plan. And it's a very liberating experience. It's not hard at all once you start it. And it is absolutely critical. And anyone that you're going to, whether it's an investor or someone that's going to be your mentor or whatever, if you don't have that, you're probably wasting their time, and they're probably not going to spend their time helping you or talking to you. So it's the right way to do things. And then you could take that. You could attach a pro forma projection on there, what you think the business is going to make. And then you could put that in investors' hands. You could put that in a bank's hands to try to, it's very difficult, but to try to get some startup money. You know, it's just something you've got to do. And it's, it's book work. I get it. But it's going to be a lot easier than that whole process is going to be a lot easier when you have a guide to follow. Gotcha. That's absolutely the number one thing I tell people. And it's always beneficial. And I'll tell you this too, Mike, about 90% of people that come to me to ask me questions and I say, hey, listen, I want you to do this. Do it over the next couple weeks. Then send it to me so I can take a look at it, and then let's sit down and talk, man. I'll help you. I'll cut out time. You can come over to my house. 90% of people I tell that to never get back to me.
That's right.
So if they're not willing to sit down and put in the time to fill something out and to dig into their mind and their concept and to hashing things out, if they're not willing to do that, then it was all just a hobby. Just keep home brewing.
Right.
It's fun, which is great.
Which is great.
It's
yeah.
Great. I miss home brewing.
Yeah.
So that's it.
Awesome. Basically, let the mind explode onto paper.
Amen. Yeah. Absolutely. So important.
Yeah. And did you happen to have a funny story for us?
Yes. I think I'm sure I'm missing some great stories. Lincoln's Beard is a very, very interesting place, as you've seen, Mike. You've been there. We have our tagline there is "Get weird at the beard," and people definitely take that to heart.
Yeah.
So I'm sure there's a million things.
I've seen some videos. I've seen some videos online, and it looks like it gets pretty freaking wild in there, man.
It's pretty wild. It's pretty wild. The funniest thing I think I've ever seen is one day, we had never had a fight in Lincolnsburg. We have very few scuffles there.
Right.
Sometimes we'll have arguments, but we just, it's not a traditional bar where people are punching each other every night. So one time I'm never there this late, but I was there. I passed by. I was totally sober, thankfully. I passed by to see how it was going. It was one of our karaoke nights. We closed at 1. It was about 12:45. And there was a table of a couple young folks, maybe in their mid-20s, maybe 20, maybe early 20s. And I think it was like 3 couples. And one of the girls, she was about the size of a penguin, man. Tiny little girl.
Okay.
One of my bartenders goes, "Hey, Falco, man, something's about to go down over there." I look over. She's getting up out of the chair. She's screaming at some other girl that's considerably bigger than her. She doesn't care, She's screaming at this other girl. A guy gets in her way. He's like, "Calm down." I get up to go walk over there. By the time I get over there, she sits down. I'm like, "All right, we're good." Within 5 minutes, that same bartender looks at me and goes, "Uh-oh." And I look over and I see this little woman just throwing haymakers at the other girl, right? So fast forward, I get over there. We have a security guy. He comes over. I'm like, these guys got to get out of here. We're closing anyway. Bye. So he grabs them, takes them outside. I walk out with them to make sure they get home safe and whatnot, get some Ubers and whatnot. Right. And they're waiting for the Uber. And the guy, which I assume was the boyfriend of the penguin here, he grabs her. Literally just holding her because she's going ballistic, like spitting and foaming out the mouth here. She's out of her mind.
Right.
And he just looks her in the eye and he tells her, he goes, "Babe, what are you doing that's positive right now?" And all I could think of is, this guy doesn't understand how pissed this lady is. Like, who looks at someone that's throwing haymakers and goes, "What are you doing that's positive?" It's not time to be a therapist. So after that, we we had to name a pale ale. What are you doing that's positive? It was actually delicious. Brew guy top.
That's awesome.
So that's probably the weirdest and funniest thing I've seen with my own eyes. That's kosher enough to talk about on a podcast.
That's awesome. That's hilarious. What are you doing that's positive right now? Oh,
what are you doing that's positive right now?
Has this guy dated? Has this guy dated a woman before? I don't think so.
Exactly. The trigger's been pulled, my friend.
Yeah.
The bullet ain't going back in the gun.
You might as well just tell her to relax or calm down.
Exactly. Yeah, that's even worse.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. Forget it.
Oh, God. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I have a little segment, quick fire five quick questions, beer related.
Let's do it.
Ready?
Yeah, hit me.
So, somebody comes into your brewery. What's one of the beers you recommend they try?
Oh, right off the bat, you got to try Swayze. Even if you tell me I hate IPAs, you got to try Swayze. Swayze is our house IPA, and it's kind of a legend. You know, it's not a hazy IPA. It's not really a West Coast. It's darker than most IPAs in the market, and it's dry. But it's just become, and it's actually, we've had it tested. It's 55 IBU. It's like 6.5%. It's basically a pale ale, but it's been around for so many years. I brewed it in my garage, and folks just love it, and I've brought it to beer festivals and brewers from around the world. They're saying, oh, finally, an IPA that I could just sit and drink and relax. So it's just kind of a weird beer that doesn't really exist in the market. And it's kind of widely loved. So Swayze for sure is the beer. P. Swayze, named after, of course, Patrick Swayze.
Late great Patrick.
Yeah, the late Patrick Swayze. Yeah.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I can contest. It's a very delicious beer, man. Very good.
Thank you. I appreciate that, sir.
Yeah, no problem. If you could collaborate with any other brewery on a beer, who would it be?
Oh, it's definitely Dogfish Head. I know that's cliche after all the talks, but it would definitely be Dogfish Head. Yeah. I'd love that. And I'm going to make it happen.
Yeah, make it happen, man. Dream big, Why not?
Yes.
Favorite style of beer?
Ooh, favorite style of beer? I love a dark German lager, like a Dunkel. Maybe even a Doppelbock if I'm feeling crazy, but a nice Dunkel sitting down. Oh, it's hard to beat that. Hard to beat that.
Barrel aged, imperial, or both?
Ooh, definitely barrel aged. I love wood, man. Even some of these beers that are just on wood and it's not even a whiskey barrel. It's just such a beautiful flavor. Cooking with it, drinking beer from it, wine, whiskey. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
love it.
I love the barrel aged wines, man. They're so good.
Yes.
It's crazy, right?
So good.
So crazy.
So good.
So smooth.
Yeah.
And you have one keg of beer to hold you over for a 2-week quarantine. Which beer are you choosing?
Oh my God! If I got to quarantine again, I'm taking something high alcohol. I'm probably. I think I'm going with. I'm going to go with a Belgian Double. I'm going to go with Westmalle Double, which I think it's up around 9% or something. So that should make me forget about the fact that I'm back in quarantine. So I think I'm going Westmalle Double. It also drinks well with food, so that sounds good. That's the one.
Perfect. Well, John, that's all I got for you, man.
Cheers, man. It was an absolute pleasure talking to you, Mike, as usual.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order podcast, here with John Falco, owner of Lincoln's Beard Brewing Company in Miami, Florida. Cheers, man. Thank you.
Cheers, Mike. Thank you so much.
Hey, guys. Thank you so much for listening to my interview with John Falco, owner of Lincoln's Beard Brewing Company in Miami, Florida. Whether you're passing through, you live in the area, or just visiting a friend nearby, you should definitely check them out. The artwork outside of the place is awesome, but the beer inside the place is even better. I know. I tasted it. My belly thanks me for it every day. Come to think of it, you should follow them on social media, because they're always posting silly stuff. That's what kept them relevant during COVID. Don't you remember? You just listened. Every other Sunday I'll be releasing a new episode, so subscribe and you'll never miss one. Also, check us out on social media, because I continue to do all types of weird stuff on there. I'm Mike Curtin for the Brew World Order podcast. You stay safe out there.